everybody. I'm Beth Shibley from Sunflower House, Aging Matters in Brevard's Caregiver Resource Center, and I'm here today with Kara Anderson from Simplifying Senior Living, and this is another Caregiver Conversation. And Kara is here today to talk about just exactly that, simplifying senior living. So, Kara, tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Absolutely. I started Simplifying Senior Living about 6 years ago after almost 20 years in assisted living. I've been an administrator, manager, regional operator, whatever. Big fan, super supporter of assisted living for over 20 years. And after representing individual facilities for so long, I wanted to kind of have the ability to represent the facility that is best for the individual client. So I'm able to show my clients a variety of resources that are most appropriate for them. I'm able to do so in a pretty neutral type setting and just show them what they can afford, what can meet their care needs for the longest time possible, with the goal being that this is their last move. I really don't want to see the clients have to relocate yet again. So we try and meet the goals long term that the resident and their family have set for themselves.
And that's kind of the gist of our conversation today, to just kind of dip our toe into that world a little bit, Kara. So I thank you so very much.
Oh.
And you're a cat lover, and that's okay, because I'm a cat lover too. I'm very jealous of your wee beasties.
Yes, I mean, one of the benefits and the drawbacks of working at home is whatever happens, happens. And I would like to say that I have two very well-behaved wee beasties, but that is just not true. So, see, we're already back. So there we go. We'll see how long this conversation lasts.
That's okay.
So I'm trying to figure out how to share my screen, and you showed me how to do it. So let me figure that out.
You go down to the bottom, hover to the bottom.
I think I shared it. Do you see it?
Not yet, but there it is. Yes, there it is.
Oh, wonderful. Well, let me get it to the beginning, because that would help us all, wouldn't it? The good news was I was reviewing my information before doing a presentation. So there I find myself in the middle. So basically what we're going to talk about today, Beth, is just planning so that we can have senior living options, so that we don't get to a crisis and our options are limited and we don't know what they are because we have not educated and informed ourselves in advance. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, kind of broad brush strokes, and I hope you'll jump in with some questions and be sure that I'm being clear and concise and meeting the goal of educating the folks. So if you're ready.
I sure am.
I'm ready. All right. Our 4 goals for today, the brief overview of what we're going to look at, is going to be know who pays for the variety of care options that you have. What are your goals as a senior? Do you want to age in place at home? Do you want to age in place in a more social environment like an assisted living or independent living facility? Know what resources are available to you, what's out there to help you obtain these goals. And then, of course, know what those options are that are available to you as a senior as you age, and especially here in Brevard County, where we have a wealth of resources for our seniors.
We really do. I mean, it's really an embarrassment of wealth in comparison to some other parts of the country that I've lived in. I've lived in northern New England. I lived in Houston, Texas, and Brevard County is just a spectacular. All of Florida is just a spectacular place to live out this third of our lives. The resources are really in place for us here.
You're absolutely right. I'm a little partial because I was raised here in Brevard County. I've left a couple times, but I keep coming back. But here in this county, we do just have a wealth of services, and it's just a matter of seeking them out because there are people available to help for sure. So who pays for these options, Beth? Where does all this embarrassment of riches come from so that we can pay for all these wonderful services? So let's talk a little bit about what covers the kind of services that we would want as we age. For example, home health care or hospitalizations or skilled nursing type care. Our medical insurance covers a little bit of that. It doesn't cover all the cost, but it does cover the cost of some of our medical facilities for acute care stays, meaning a medical incident might have
Right.
occurred, and so that you go in the hospital. I think previously when we were talking, you used a fractured hip as an example, which is a perfect example of something that medical insurance would help pay for. Medicare does not cover the cost of medical facilities beyond that acute care stay. So Medicare being a payer source only for a limited amount of care that you may need as you age. It does pay for home health care, limited. Your physical therapy, your occupational therapy, speech therapist that may come to your home after an incident. It covers your doctor's appointments, but it does not pay for room, board, or care at an assisted living facility at all. And of course, that's not an all-inclusive list. Anybody who wants to educate themselves and learn more about Medicare and the benefits they're entitled to through that program can go to medicare.gov for further information.
You know, one of the things that I realized when my dad was undergoing PT was that, you know, and as a younger person, I was embarrassingly naive about what Medicare would cover. But I did think I've figured out that they will cover PT until the therapists feel you've gotten as far as you can, not till it's spectacular. So if the therapist figures that you're most likely always going to be walking with a walker, and that's as far as they're going to expect you to be able to get, chances are Medicare is pretty much going to say you've reached your optimal limit, and you're not going to be, you know, water skiing. You know,
Right.
So that was something that I said, well, wait a minute, no, Dad really isn't. He isn't as good as he could. Well, yeah, he was.
Yeah.
So that was one of those things that we need to understand, that, you know, when they talk about PT and OT and being limited, that there's an expectation of optimum level of abilities. Yeah.
Yes, you're exactly right. And I do want to point out that right now we are in enrollment period
Yes.
for different Medicare benefits and Medicare Advantage plans. And I would just really encourage anybody who's looking at transitioning from traditional Medicare, your red, white, and blue card, to an Advantage plan, really look into the benefits of that Advantage plan. I understand the Advantage plan says there's zero copays or there's zero premium every month, whereas Medicare comes out of your Social Security. Watch what you're getting for those dollars and be sure that they meet the actual needs that you have. Talking with an expert in insurance, such as an individual at Shine, which is available to us here in Brevard County, is a really good idea to find a neutral resource who can talk you through truly what your needs are going to be. A lot of our seniors have pretty high financial tabs on medication. So what is truly going to cover which plan is going to be best for you, because we've all heard about the donut hole and all that good stuff, which I am not an expert at. I'm an expert at donuts because I do like those. But the donut hole pertaining to medications, I am not an expert. So talking to somebody as you're making those choices, and probably not the salesperson of the Advantage plan itself, is probably not your most neutral opinion. So really kind of gathering the information before you trade in that red, white, and blue Medicare card is really important. So that's Medicare, just a very, very broad stroke brush on that. Moving on to long-term care insurance. Some people forget that they bought long-term care insurance policies a long, long time ago. Some people are still looking into those policies and investing in those policies. I told my parents if they did not invest in long-term care insurance, that my brother was going to take care of them because I wasn't going to deal with all the costs, and good luck with that. So they actually purchased long-term care insurance some time ago. Older policies are better because they identified a lot of loopholes, which they have since closed. And purchased policies will cover, and they give you usually a daily benefit or a total benefit to cover the expense of private duty home care. So that allows people to stay in their home and they can afford it. It covers a daily rate on assisted living facilities, some skilled nursing facilities, and even the services of a private geriatric care manager, which we'll talk about more within the course of this talk. Then we have our statewide Medicaid managed care, and that is a benefit for those who are eligible financially for this additional aid. And that's how I kind of explain it to folks, the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare pays for the care that you receive, medical care, whereas Medicaid is an aid. It's a supplement for those who qualify for it through low income. It's a low income benefit. So it's essentially the privatization of the Medicaid system here in Florida. We have certain private providers that manage that Medicaid money for the state. And it truly is best to seek professional guidance and financial planning pertaining to Medicaid and Medicaid eligibility. There is a link there for the Florida Medicaid Managed Care Program. You might want to be a scholar before you just jump right into this. It's kind of a complicated system, which is why I recommend folks seek some kind of professional financial guidance. And some people think that Medicaid is just a switch that you flip when you run out of money. And it truly does take an amount of time, not only to apply for those benefits, to qualify for those benefits, and then wait for that, the funding to come through the state in order for you to receive those benefits.
Oh yeah, and I think that it's not always super stagnant, so things change as laws change, and Florida's laws change and federal laws change, and you have to pay attention with Medicaid. You really do have to pay attention to your own personal assets. And sometimes there are other things that are involved in that. I'm nowhere near being an expert either, but whether or not you're by yourself, whether or not you have a spouse, whether or not you have children that are, you might have an adult child that still depends upon you because they're disabled. There's all kinds of different reasons why you're going to want to investigate that route well in advance of actually thinking you're going to need it. And it's not going to, and you're right, it doesn't happen overnight. You can apply for it, and it could be, it's not going to be hours before they say, oh yeah, good, you're on it.
That's correct.
You're most likely talking months, weeks or months, I think, before you, I don't know what the average stay is right now, but sitting in line, but I don't think it's like between now and Thanksgiving if you signed up for it now.
No, for sure not. It can even be over a year. It just really depends on where they are in the funding for the state in general. And, money only goes so far, and there's only so many dollars in that pot. So having somebody assist you through that process is so important. And like you said, managing those assets, I have people tell me all the time, well, we're going to have to sell mom's house and we're going to have to sell her car. Please don't do that. Please don't make those kind of financial decisions without talking to somebody, because you can protect those assets and you can preserve them and really help that person maximize their ability to stay in long-term care. So getting professional guidance on that, and that doesn't mean from me, to get somebody who actually is qualified, legal professional is probably best in that particular area. And then veterans assistance, there are VA benefits that are available, the aid and attendance benefit. And that I strongly recommend, Beth, that folks get that financial guidance from somebody who is accredited. There's a lot of people out there that will say, oh, I'll help you with that application. It's easy. Well, yeah, the application is kind of easy, but gathering all of that information, knowing that it's the right financial choice for you, and knowing how that fits in your financial plan, the average individual cannot help you with that and should not be helping you with that. So really seeking that assistance from a professional who is accredited by the VA that says that there's some kind of if they turn in the application and it comes back denied, you only get one opportunity to, well, not one opportunity to appeal, but you can only appeal one application per lifetime. So you don't want somebody who's filled it out wrong and then says, oopsies. You want somebody who is actually responsible for that and has some checks and balances by being, maybe accountable to the bar, the legal bar of Florida, something like that. Not somebody that says, oops, you really should probably appeal this decision. So getting assistance with that is really important. And people say, oh, I don't want to have to pay for an attorney. I promise you the couple of $100s that you pay for a consultation or to work with the attorney to get that benefit, the benefit is ultimately going to pay for that attorney visit several times over. So just my 2 cents on that particular topic. So know your goals, all these things, what they pay for, what is it that the senior individual wants? What do you want to do? What's important to you? We certainly don't want to allow fear, maybe fear of going to a facility. You don't want that fear to play a role. Facilities aren't what they used to be. A lot of people said, I never wanted to go to a home. Don't make me go to a home. Well, have you seen them lately? They're pretty nice. And making these plans kind of help to ensure that somebody's able to afford one of these facilities. And we don't want to allow, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the line, don't allow fear to change your role. I was at a conference, a webinar conference yesterday, and one of the things that the guy put up was that worrying doesn't stop not great stuff from happening, but it does stop you from enjoying great stuff that you're doing right now. I'm paraphrasing. So
absolutely right.
So, you're just, it's so being fearful, it won't, it's not particularly a productive thing that I've got, and I have it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It does. It causes us to really pause and not take steps forward. So I encourage seniors now, go look at assisted living facilities, kind of revamp that picture that you have in your mind. Just go visit. You don't have to, buy anything. They're not going to sign you up and lock the door. Just go look at what these options are so that you're more educated and you're more likely to frame it in your own head and in your own planning a little bit more accurately. Because if we're afraid of the unknown.
And I got to tell you, I think that, if people have in their head, you're right, people have in their heads the assisted livings and the skilled nursing facilities and even the independent livings that were, from a very long time ago. There might have been 20 or 30 years ago when they were looking into it for their own parents, and they haven't touched in on any of it since then. And the world of especially independent living has grown enormously in the past 30 years. That idea of having those kinds of living arrangements and graduated a home where you can live and you can move forward with the different stages of your life. And I think we'll be talking about that moving forward. But those kinds of things might not have even been available 30 years ago.
Correct.
And now all of a sudden, so yeah, you do need to take another look at it because you can't make assumptions about what's out there. You're shutting doors that you don't need to shut.
You're right. One of the biggest obstacles that I have sometimes working with clients is I try and offer, especially as a more affordable option for those who have, less money, and we want to stretch that money as long as possible for sure. I offer to show them a small residential assisted living facility. These are licensed by the state, just like the big guys are. And most of the time I'm told, no. Oh, I heard those are terrible. I've heard. And I'm like, well, I hear what you're hearing, but let's go take a look. Because I think what you're hearing is very different from what actually is. And, certainly, I'm not going to take you to a terrible place. I'm not going to represent a terrible place. But I think that just taking a look at somebody's beautiful residential home where they're providing great care and attention to only 6 people, that may be a beautiful environment for some people, and it's certainly more affordable in some cases, and in most cases, So really not closing your mind to the options that are out there. Now you may get there and you say, this is absolutely not for me.
Right.
And that's okay. But at least we've explored an option that is within affordability. So I really think as folks are putting together that plan, that they stay open and not think about what they've heard, but actually put their own eyeballs on some of these options that are within their financial means.
Yeah, I know. I think that sometimes people, you hear about, and it never fails, when things get into residential places get into problems because they are a little smaller. I mean, you'll hear about them on the news and, during a hurricane that this place was without power or they had a hard time getting all their people out. And those are so much the exception and not the rule. So you need to really pay attention to all of those places, and they're all regulated by the state, and you can look up whether or not there's been any problems or there's been any complaints to the ombudsman's programs or any of those things.
Yes.
And if they're good, they're going to give you references and recommendation. They're going to give you references, and you're going to be able to talk to folks. So yeah, don't say no without looking at it.
Absolutely. And I mean, those small homes in particular, then I'm going to step down off this soapbox, but those small homes in particular make up 60%, even a little bit over 60% of the almost, I think we're at like 3,600 assisted living facilities in the state of Florida. And that certainly rings true here in Brevard County. About 60% of the assisted living facilities that are licensed here in Brevard are these small residential homes. So there's a lot of options out there to consider. And, I'm not a statistician, I'm a social worker, so I do very simple math, but just, by law of averages, they can't all be terrible. So, there's some out there that are really doing a great job and are worthy of consideration for sure. And it might be just the right sized environment for your loved ones. So certainly, I would encourage folks to stay open to those options and not fall into what they've heard versus what they've seen. And that could go right into don't allow others to pressure you. Don't let other people. I mean, if somebody has had a personal experience with a nursing home or an assisted living facility or a private duty care company, you certainly should listen to their experiences because that's valuable. But that's not the sum total of experiences for that particular provider.
Yeah, you need to put it in and weigh it for what it's worth. You give it the amount of creditability and you put it in the bucket with everything else that you're deciding.
You're exactly right. Exactly. Give it just the amount of weight it deserves, and empower yourself with more knowledge about each of those options. Know about your insurance. Know if you have a long-term care insurance policy. I've met with a lot of adult children who are seeking the proper living environment for their parent. And I'll say, do your parents have long-term care insurance? I don't know. That's a really good question. Let me ask my mom. And then mom says, well, I don't know. I think maybe your father signed up for something, but nobody knows because dad has now passed. And maybe they were in, the shuffle of paperwork that everybody has that they don't know exactly what's in it. So knowing right now, do you have long-term care insurance, what it covers, and how much it provides you on a daily, monthly, and total amount that you are insured for. It's very important. It goes towards your finances. Be realistic regarding your diagnosis. If you have an early diagnosis of something that's going to be debilitating as the disease progresses, your care needs are going to increase, your costs are going to increase, and you want to be sure and kind of factor that in to your plan. Some people are healthy. We just take, maybe some cholesterol medication or some blood pressure meds, but we need to be very familiar with our diagnoses and how that's going to look going forward.
One of the things just to go back quickly to not allowing others to pressure you into change you don't want. I don't know if you've ever had I imagine you probably have had the experience where different children in the family have very different ideas as to what's best for mom. Nobody's checking with mom, even though mom's perfectly capable of having an opinion on her own. But that can get pretty dicey, I imagine, Kara.
Oh my heavens. Boy, have you opened a can of worms on that one. I will tell you, back when I was an administrator as well as now, I pretty much say, hey, can I talk to whoever is the power of attorney? And I will maintain communication with the power of attorney. And then it's up to the power of attorney to communicate with the family.
Mhm.
And, you know, in all families, it's a little bit difficult. You know, so we talked about this, Beth. Some of the adult children are going to feel slightly disenfranchised because they've been farther away from mom and dad. They live farther away. Some are going to feel like their opinion doesn't matter as much because they're the youngest. Some are going to feel like they don't matter as much because they can't financially contribute to the decisions that the other siblings might be contributing financially to. So
Mhm.
even in really tight sibling groups, there's going to be a little bit of challenge. So I would also encourage families, you know, the providers aren't therapists. They're not your family therapists. They're not your, you know,
Right.
they're not there to solve your family dynamic problems. They're here to solve the problem that exists right now, which is the care and concern of your senior parent. So
Mhm.
I would encourage families to kind of leave that stuff, you know, to the side, just present the information that's needed in order to educate yourself on the options that are available and, you know, save therapy for, I don't know, Dr. Phil or something along those lines, but but not your service provider, not your assisted living administrator, or, you know, in the sales process, we're not bickering in the sales room. You know, that's not helpful to the process or to your aging parents
Right. Right.
who are trying to make these decisions and with.
Well, and sometimes you're dealing with the person themselves. It's not necessarily that there's a power of attorney in place. I mean, many times they're fully capable of making their own decisions, but they want a child or their family with them to support them.
You're
So
exactly right.
you
Yeah.
know that's the other piece too. Yes, this is conversation that we're doing is because Sunflower House is geared towards a caregiver. There's assumption that the person isn't caregiving for themselves, but you could be a caregiver and you could be the spouse of someone who needs additional care.
Yes.
And you might have kids that absolutely don't agree with what it is you're saying, or some of them do and some of them don't, and it's a hot mess. And wow, um, Thanksgiving social distancing might not be a bad thing if you're actually in that role this year. I mean, there's a little silver lining to not having everyone around
Yeah.
the table throwing turkey
Yeah, some
legs.
families are breathing easier this year. But that's a perfect segue, Beth, to advanced directives. A
Yes.
lot of our seniors are perfectly capable of participating in these decisions that affect and impact their lives. And I'm a strong proponent of talking to the senior about what their goals are, about, you know, and what's realistic. And I'll have
Sure.
families call me and say, hey, you need to come tell my dad he has to move to assisted living. And I say, no, that is not what I do. I do not compel anybody. I can educate, I can inform, and I can tell you based on previous experience what I've seen, but I cannot tell any individual, and I will not tell any individual, especially in their 80s and 90s. Are you kidding me? I mean, they gave us this world that we live in right now. I'm not telling them to do anything. Um, but it's really important to include that individual in the discussion and understand what their needs and their hesitations and their concerns and fears are, and
Absolutely.
communicate about those and work through those. And certainly advanced directives are a huge part of that because they've entrusted you as their power of attorney to make decisions when they just can't. And sometimes it's can't because they're cognitively incapable, and sometimes it's can't because they just don't know what to do. They're cognitively intact, but they're overwhelmed. They're
Mhm.
overwhelmed by the totality of what's going on with them right now, and they really just need that trusted individual that they place as their power of attorney to help guide them through that process. And
Right.
that is a kindness that I encourage powers of attorneys to utilize, including communication with their adult parent all the
Mhm.
time. That sometimes when you're making these choices, that maybe as that adult child, you're thinking through all the options On the bigger scale, you're narrowing it down and you're presenting the options in a very minimal scale. We can afford to do this, or we can afford to do this. Which do you prefer? As opposed to, well, there's 27 options. Let me tell you a little bit about each. Even when somebody's cognitively intact, they're not confused, they're perfectly capable. That's just a lot of information for them to process when they are also processing the challenges that they're currently experiencing. Whether it's physical challenges, they're not able to walk like they used to, maybe they're post-stroke. It's a lot to process in a post-stroke brain. You can process well, it just takes you a little bit more time, and that's exhausting for that post-stroke brain. So really understanding how to kind of present the information even when the person is cognitively intact, not impaired, and being there for them and narrowing down those options and simplifying that for them as much as possible is just as important as the power of attorney who is there and making those decisions in the place of the individual who's no longer able to do so because they're not cognitively able to do that. That was a whole lot of words to say what I said, but did we get to the same place?
Yeah, I think we did. I think that, sometimes it's just a matter of, if the person's cognitively intact, I got to say, sometimes I think it's a matter of just being worried they're going to make the wrong decision.
Absolutely.
And they just want, especially if they've had a partner their whole lives that's passed, how many times in our lives have we had somebody that we could just say, hey, am I crazy? This is what I'm thinking, and batting things back and forth through our lives as we've moved along, whether it's a best friend or a sibling or a partner or a spouse or whoever it is, to be able to have that person that you cannot have to walk through life by yourself.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's just about being there to validate their choices, to make sure that they're making it so that they can calm their mind and know with some assurity, yes, there's somebody else that's thinking the way I'm thinking, that I'm not losing my mind.
Absolutely. And another thing I like to reassure, since we're kind of on this topic, is no decision that you make is set in stone.
Right.
You can
Right.
always
Walk away.
change, right? If you choose a private duty home care company and they're just not working out, or you're not really, jiving with the care, you can make a change. If you move into an assisted living facility and a couple months down the road, you're like, oh, this isn't quite what I thought it was going to be. You can always move. They're required by law to give you 30 days. You just give them a 30-day notice and your contract is terminated. So nothing that you choose is set in stone. It might involve some inconvenience. It might involve some more cost in order to make a move or to make a change, but you don't have to stay in a situation that isn't what you thought it was going to be when you made that decision. Just like any of us, we can undo our choices. Sometimes it costs us a little bit emotionally or financially, but we can undo stuff.
Sometimes lessons cost us some money. Say, well,
that's right. That's right. So coming up with a plan in advance, being proactive, this really helps. It helps have the conversations early, and it helps you to have some flexibility later on down the line. So who helps you achieve these goals? I like to talk about that circle of concern. If you saw my 3 tips with Susan, I talk about the circle of concern. These are your friends, your family, your doctors, your clergy, your physical therapist, anybody who is involved in the care of that senior parent. They are your circle. They're your tribe. They're your squad, whatever we want to call them these days. These are the folks that we can reach out to and say, I'm really stumped. What am I supposed to do? Or what are my options here? So who is in your circle of concern? Knowing your resources in the area, the first person, if you want to stay at home, or if you just want some overall general advice in making a plan, a care manager is an amazing asset and an amazing resource just like you would go to a lawyer for some legal concerns, or you would go to an accountant for a financial matter. This geriatric care manager is an expert in the field of aging. They know all the local resources, and they know how it will potentially impact you, or can at least inform you and educate you about how these particular resources may impact you. Because who doesn't prefer to stay at home? We'd all love to do that. But if you're going to stay at home, I really do I recommend that you have a care manager on board. Otherwise, you kind of become an employer and it becomes a full-time job. Because if you've got caregivers coming into the home, you've got different services coming into the home, you're now the chief scheduler, the person that makes sure that they're doing their job appropriately. You're the reviewer, you're their HR, you are the person that pays the bills, you're everything. So you now have a full-time job. A care manager kind of takes over a lot of those roles and responsibilities for you. And they do it with the knowledge of years of experience and many, many clients that they have assisted. Whereas sometimes the adult child is assisting the first person ever in their life through these situations. So that care manager is going to know what services are available, what
one
they
of the
cost.
things when I think about care managers, I think about them being sort of like a general contractor if you're building a home. I mean, I love my husband to pieces, but whenever we have a toilet that keeps running, he spends about half of 3 weeks, in and out, half a day every day for 3 weeks, in and out of Home Depot, trying to get whatever it is that's going to fix before I finally say, well, I'm calling a plumber. So, he would not be the first choice if we were going to build a home, he would not be we would not be our own first choice as a general contractor. You want to have somebody that's overseeing the whole thing, that's looking at the big picture. You're exactly right. That knows the resources. So if you think of your your care manager is sort of the general contractor that can help orchestrate this dance.
That is the best analogy, and I am so stealing that from now on.
Yeah.
You can steal that. You're exactly right. It's like not having a general manager and your electricians are showing up after your drywall was installed, or your plumbers are showing up after the cement was already laid, and they can't get the plumbing in. It just kind of creates a mess. You're exactly right. A care manager keeps everything flowing and in the proper order. And they're going to help you understand what services are available, what the range of costs are. Is it safe to stay in the home? A safety assessment. What family is going to be involved? What physicians are going to be involved? How much do you want to still be involved in your community at large? That's important. You still want to go to church. You still want to participate in garden club. What are the things that you want to still participate in? What is your access to friends?
Mm-hmm.
In the times of COVID, it's not like your friends could just come over, and visit. And a lot of our seniors aren't savvy with technology. So this is somebody who helps you navigate that and make sure that happens. Access to recreation, socialization. Sometimes it's great to stay at home because that's what you wanted to do. But when it's just you and one caregiver all day, every day, is that really the socialization that you intended for yourself? Or is that a little bit more isolating than you thought it would be when you originally had this plan?
I think it really speaks to people understanding that these are very individual decisions. Very individual decisions. And each one of those things on that list that you said, they're all, none of them are necessarily on their own good or bad. Mm-hmm. It's your own, it's where you land on that. You're right. Involvement in the community. I mean, you really need to dig down into what does that mean? Access to friends. How much are your friends capable? How many friends do you have left? Have you lost a lot of your friends due to moving away or having passed away themselves? They think, folks think, oh, well, I won't be around my friends. But then when you really analyze it, they haven't had a lot of friends that have been able to come over. So you're right. Maybe there's an idea here that their other choices might be a better fit. Right. So, yeah.
And again, you can change your mind, right? You
Oh,
thought that
absolutely.
private duty home care, staying at home, you thought that was absolutely the bee's knees. That was the only thing you've ever wanted to do. And then you're 4, 5, 6 months in, and you're thinking, this isn't exactly all I envisioned it to be.
Mhm.
Maybe I need to make a change. In which case, that circle of concern key member, care manager, is going to come back in and is going to talk to you about, your plan is fluid. You can make changes. What if there's changes in not only your isolation, your feelings of being isolated, but maybe you receive a diagnosis, or you have a significant health event, and staying
Right.
at home is no longer a reasonable and safe option. I have a lot of seniors who say, you know what, I don't want to be at home alone because I'm afraid I'm going to fall. And
Mhm.
that's a very big and a very real fear, for
Mhm.
a lot of our seniors. And it's certainly real once you've had one fall. It's really hard to recuperate and,
Mhm.
get back to where you were prior to that. We all know that it's going to change, and not all people consider this when looking at their finances and their goals. It's really important, again, like I said, to understand that as your needs increase, the costs increase. And so we need to see that reflected in that financial plan that we put together. It's not going to be $4,000 a month forever. It's going to, increase incrementally as our needs increase. Not everybody can have their needs met at home financially. It's not always prudent to do that. And then the care manager will come back to the table with a new plan that reflects the new needs and, the new financial plan that's in place based on any significant changes that may have occurred. So who pays for this wonderful angel that we're referring to as a care manager? Long-term care insurance, some of those policies do cover the cost of a care manager. Most of the time it's private pay, but if you've got that long-term care insurance benefit, it's really nice to tap into that. You have it, you've paid for it, why not use it? And then employee assistance programs. A lot of our adult children are kind of in that generation where they're still working. They might even still have children at home, but they're still working and they're having to take care of their adult parents. A lot of employers offer employee assistance programs. And if you ask your EAP officer or director, do they have a care management benefit that will cover the cost of a few meetings with a care manager, that will put you well on your way to
That's
determining what that plan may be.
such a great nugget. I know when we were kind of talking about this before, I was really surprised to hear that that's really an option. So people need to kind of look into that, because you might normally, when you think about EAP, you're thinking about mental health benefits. You're not necessarily thinking about help with something like a care manager. So yeah, look into it. Who knows? You know,
Absolutely. I mean, this is a little bit of mental health benefit, isn't it? When you're
it is.
trying to care for an adult.
And the smart and smart employers now are starting to see that it's part of the social determinants of health. That's the buzzword all around that so very few things that impact our health actually take place in the 5 minutes we're with our doctor once a year,
Yeah.
or even that most of it takes place in our everyday living, and this would be part of that.
Absolutely. It's worth the question. And for employers, it's definitely worth it to provide this benefit, because their whole goal is to keep you from missing days at work. So they
Right.
want to help you solve the problems that are keeping you from being a productive employee. So
Right.
it's a win-win for everybody when there is that care management benefit or information through your EAP.
Mhm.
And then I do want to note, I've been calling them care managers because that's what we've called them forever, but they are transitioning into a new title. There's a new movement for these individuals being called aging life care professionals, which does sound so much nicer than geriatric care manager. So aging life care professionals, if you're watching this from another state, you're not in Florida, you're not local, folks around here are certainly aging life professionals. But if you are in another state, you can go to this website, aginglifecare.org. There's a little orange button at the top right, and it says enter your zip code. And you just click it, and then you enter your zip code, and it will list all the aging life care professionals who have registered with this organization, which means they have credentials. and it will list who is available in your area. So
You
that's
know, that,
anywhere.
that's the other piece that can be really comforting when you're talking about folks that are venturing out into this kind of unknown world, this black box that is, senior care, to know that these folks are credentialed, and there's been some vetting that's gone through that, and then also that they are going to be working in your best interest, and they're going, if they're worth their salt, they're going to be, they're not going to make a referral to something that they know is been a place that's been problematic. They're
That's
really
correct.
out towards your own best goals.
That's correct. Yes, absolutely. And and I'm not going to sit here and throw stones, because what I do is not regulated either, and it's very much reliant on the individual providing services like I provide, to be ethical and to be honest and to be knowledgeable. I personally also carry liability insurance, but that's my personal choice. It's the same with care managers. They're not regulated either. So it's so important that when you're kind of, like you say, vetting these individuals, that at least you're starting with an organization who has kind of looked into their credentials, because not everybody can register with this particular organization. They do have to have certain credentials, and anybody can call themselves a placement person or a care manager, an aging life care professional. All they have to do is make cards at Staples, little business cards, and hand them out. Just really.
Mm-hmm. And I would say to you that it's very much from state to state, these things might very well change. So that if you're in California or Massachusetts or Minnesota, and you're trying to figure out what to do with mom who lives in Brevard County, be careful the assumptions you make about accreditations and about regulations and who might be able to. It's very much regulated state by state, locally, and sometimes not regulated at all.
Yes, you're exactly right.
Be very careful with that. Don't make assumptions that just because there's a hyper amount of regulations because you live in Connecticut, that the same is going to be true for your mom that lives in Tennessee.
So true. That I see that quite a bit. People say, well, I'm just going to move my mom to New York and I'm going to put her in a facility here on Medicaid. And I'm like, well, I don't know that it works like that. There might be residency requirements. Now, there aren't in Florida, but, there may be in other states. So I give this website a lot, because it is worth a couple $100 to have a conference with an aging life care professional before you start making really big money moves. You could lose a lot more money than you could paying a professional to advise you.
I gotta say, that's a couple of weeks worth of groceries. If you can scrape together that much, it certainly would probably pay dividends moving down the line.
Absolutely. And time, energy, and money, it will always pay off. And I'm going to say always. I try and avoid those kind of terms, but always pay off to look in advance on these things, for sure. So knowing your options, now that we've talked about all the things, all the payer sources, and who can help us kind of wrangle those network of resources through a care manager, what are our options? What can we do as an aging senior to kind of plan what we want to do? What are our goals? If our goals are to stay home, there is private duty home care. These are private caregivers that come into your home, cost ranging between about $18 to $24 per hour. So it is definitely our most expensive option. Agency, going through an agency is always, here I'm going to use another always, I say almost always, so I did qualify this one. It's almost always better than a friend of a friend or a private individual. We talked before, Beth, about, a neighbor might be kind enough to go over and check on an elderly neighbor, but they shouldn't really be put in the position of providing personal care or having specific responsibility for that senior. Somebody kind of needs to be in charge.
Really squishy. That gets really squishy.
Yeah.
I just know that there are people who are friends and they've been friends for forever and they don't mind, and they're going to come over and they're going to, all of a sudden they're doing grocery shopping, and all of a sudden they're making a dinner, and then all of a sudden they're helping to clean the house, and then it's a slippery slope. And one of the things that I worry about, or I would worry about or have worried about in the past with family members, is whether or not there's, sometimes these folks are not necessarily 25 or 30 years old themselves.
You're right.
And even though they might be perfectly okay coming over and helping out, and wouldn't at all be upset if they fell and broke their hip in your living room because they were trying to help you with something.
Mm-hmm.
Their child, the lawyer, might not feel the same way about that.
Correct. Yeah, and
there's liability issues that you really have to be careful about. These folks don't come with compensation. They don't come with insurances.
That is absolutely correct. And I don't think you or I are dissuading anybody from being a kind neighbor, dropping off groceries, checking on people. If you haven't seen somebody, in a few days, and you usually see them, checking on them, maybe, developing a routine. Hey, would you just crack your curtains every morning so that I know that everything's okay? Whatever your routine may be, particularly during the time of COVID, we can't go over really and check on them. But something, along those lines, we wouldn't want to discourage that. But when it gets beyond just the casual, hey, if you're going to the grocery store, can you grab me this? When we start moving into, hey, I can no longer get in the shower by myself. Could you come over and help me? Or I'm having difficulty standing up, getting out of bed in the morning. Can you come help me? That's where we're kind of crossing a line with just a neighbor who is unlicensed, who is not bonded and not insured to provide those kind of services. And that's where we get into some trouble.
And that's why I'm saying it gets squishy, because everybody's got to know their own boundaries. But I think it does help people to have an understanding of what's a realistic expectation of a family, a friend, and family members who are trying to caregive for their families, their loved one remotely, need to understand that piece too. They might or might not recognize what kinds of things are actually happening, and they need to pay attention to that. You're very right.
Right.
My mom has friends that if she's not outside picking up the newspaper or picking up her mail by a certain time, they're giving her a call, or they're calling
Certainly.
me.
Yes.
Or if they haven't seen the garage door be opened all day, they're tootling over to say, hey, are you okay? That's a totally different situation. We all appreciate that, but
totally different.
Your spidey senses need to tingle if it starts to get more than that.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And we're going to talk about that in just a second when we get to the very bottom of this slide. But we need to determine, when we're going through that agency, what exactly do we want that caregiver to do? What are our needs specifically? Do we just want them to provide companionship? I kind of just want you to be here in case I fall. I just want you to be here because it makes me feel more comfortable to have somebody else in the house. I just want you to, fix me a sandwich for lunch and maybe warm up my dinner on the way out in the evening. What is it? Or do you need, that's one level of care. Or do you need somebody to help you with your bathing, your grooming, your dressing, your transferring? That requires a different level of care and a different type of agency. So you need to know exactly what it is that you're expecting from the individual coming in. And as you just mentioned, private duty caregivers should never, ever, ever be responsible for paying bills, cashing checks, taking your credit or debit card and running to the grocery store, taking your checkbook and just running up to make a payment on something. Any fiduciary duty should not be in the hands of a private duty caregiver. That is just, it's not appropriate for that individual, and that is where things get a little tricky. So never ever.
Yeah, I had, where I worked up north, we had a situation where we had an employee. I worked for the senior service agency, a nonprofit agency, and we did transportation and Meals on Wheels and all kinds of different things, but to help people in the community. But we had a fellow that was perfectly okay driving through the drive-through with the bus, and he was taking, Mildred would write a check out to cash and she'd hand it to him, and he'd cash it for her. And it was not a pretty situation when her son came over to take a look and said, "Mom, what are all these checks written out to cash for?"
Yeah.
And he got into a little bit of trouble, even though there was nothing nefarious going on. It was certainly
Right.
outside the scope of what he should have been doing. And so you understand that the private duty caregivers, you're putting their livelihood at risk if you ask them to do these things.
That is correct. I was going to say, it's not that every, caregiver has nefarious intentions. I love that word, nefarious intentions. But if I have a little bit of dementia going on and I have forgotten that I gave this person $100 and then all of a sudden it's stolen, in my mind, it's stolen. But I gave it to them, or if I've been offering them tips all along and they've been accepting it, and now I'm a little bit confused where my money went. And now I think they stole it. So there can be some confusion, particularly when there's a little dementia on board. And like you said, when a family goes back and reviews and says, where'd all this money go? And the caregiver says, oh, well, they tip me every day $20 when I leave. Well, really? What are we paying you for? that is your tip, getting paid. That's kind of an inappropriate relationship. And when you go through an agency, I'm not going to say it's not going to happen, but it's a lot less likely to happen because you've got people at the agency that are setting expectations and trainings and reiterating those matters, and you have someone to go to if you have questions. So agency is, they're licensed, bonded, insured. They're regulated by the state of Florida. There's a lot of checks and balances there. So that's why it's so important to utilize an agency. So what are your goals? What exactly do you want that private duty caregiver to do? How many hours will that take per week? And does that meet all your needs, including safety? If you want a companion with you at all times because you feel unsteady, what happens when you go to bed? Are you going to have a 24-hour caregiver there just to watch you sleep? Because you might need to get up in the middle of the night and go to the restroom, and you might not feel safe. So you have to count all of that time in, because they haven't gone home and then you buzz them to come back because you need to go to the bathroom. You got to pay for all that time. So you want to contact multiple agencies, you want to interview them, and you want to compare pricing, see what their prices are. Some of them do different minimums. You have to do so many hours per day, so many days a week. Some of them will do, a minimum of 1 hour. So just understanding what your options are there and what that cost is going to be. So who pays for this lovely service that keeps us at home as long as we want to be there? You pay privately out of your pocket. You might have a long-term care insurance policy that covers a per day or per month or a total amount benefit for private duty home care. VA aid and attendance does provide reimbursement for this care at a lower level than if you're in a facility. And then managed care or Medicaid does pay for minimal hours at home, and they even discourage that. Most of the folks that would like to stay at home aren't able to do so safely because the hours are so minimal that it makes more sense to go into assisted living to receive that benefit. Options. Where do we go if we want to live? We want to live in congregate living with other folks our age that have social opportunities and opportunities to thrive, with meals being prepared because we're done cooking and we're done cleaning and we're done mowing our own yard, right? Because we've been doing that up until 80. And believe me, I know people in their 80s that are still doing all of these things. They're still mowing their own yard, which I love it. But now you're done with all of that and you're ready to go into a more accommodating living arrangement. So independent living can range from sliding scale rent for low-income seniors, which means it adjusts according to their income, to $4,000 plus per month. Depending on where you go, amenities are going to affect the price. Those sliding scale rental communities often have a very long waiting list. So if that's something that you feel is in your budget and something that you'll be looking for in the next couple of years, the waiting list can literally be that long. Independent living facilities don't offer services themselves, but services can be brought in. For example, you can live in independent living and have a private duty home care worker that comes in. You can also get Medicare home care to come in. They do it intermittently and for a short period of time, but maybe you need a little bit of physical therapy, occupational therapy. You can still have that there. Meal plans vary. Some offer 1 meal a day, some offer 0 meals a day, some offer 3 meals a day. It just depends. And then certainly what you're there for are those organized social activities. Typically, that's why you move into independent living, to not only kind of put all that housework behind you, but to also be able to socially engage with your peer group and have a good time. Lots of happy hours going on around there. So assisted living is another option. This happens to be my wheelhouse, my passion, assisted living. And assisted living is going to cost anywhere between $3,000 to $6,000 and up per month. Of course, the more expensive assisted living is going to be for those with memory care needs and concerns. Who pays for that assisted living? No, Medicare does not pay for it. As we discussed way back at the beginning, this is a private pay situation. Assisted living is private pay. It comes out of your own pocket. Managed care or Medicaid will pay a stipend. It's a small amount. It ranges from about $800 to $1,400 here locally per month. And that's only to pay for the care, not your room and board. So you still have to come up with the balance of that. Long-term care insurance typically offers a daily, monthly, or total benefit for assisted living. And then VA aid and attendance will pay monthly. They will pay the veteran or their responsible party with the anticipation that that stipend goes towards paying for their medical care or their assisted living facility. How do you know which assisted living facility is right for you? You definitely want to look at a few. You want to check your options. You want to know the price points. Again, as we talked about a long, long time ago at the beginning of this, go out and familiarize yourself early with some of these facilities. Meet some of the folks that are the administrators, the salespeople, the nurses. Now, those may change because they do change jobs, and that's okay. But you might hang on to them as somebody in your circle of concern who has considerable knowledge in that particular area. People can call me. They're going to get my number at the end of this presentation. I'm happy to offer that neutral, informative, educational discussion of what the options are and what the benefits of each option may be for that individual, understanding that our assisted living facilities are licensed to do a lot of different things. And really, the state has licensed and regulates these facilities in such a way that people are able to age in place and actually pass away in assisted living facilities. So the goal is that an assisted living facility would be the last move for any individual, and that they can age in place there with the folks that know for them, care for them, and that they've developed relationships with this late in life. Skilled nursing facilities are most definitely our most expensive option, especially if we have to pay for them privately. These can cost between $6,000 to $12,000 up per month. Who pays for this? Medicare will pay for a limited stay if you're there on a rehab basis. If you've had an incident like we discussed before, a fractured hip, and you're just going in for a little rehab, Medicare is going to pay on a limited basis for that. Your medical insurance is going to be your copay or your secondary pay source, and they're going to pay for a limited amount of time for that. If you're staying long-term and you have private long-term care insurance, they will pay the daily, monthly, or total amount that you have been insured for. And then managed care or Medicaid is available in skilled nursing, and that's now limited. What's happening now is folks go into skilled nursing to qualify for Medicaid and to receive Medicaid benefits, and then typically they are discharged back out into an assisted living facility that accepts those Medicaid benefits. The state is really looking for those nursing homes, those skilled rehab centers to be for the chronic and critically ill. And for those who just require some custodial assistance with their activities of daily living and socialization and some overall supervision that's not medically complex, they would prefer to see those folks in an assisted living environment. So Medicaid is fairly limited within the skilled nursing, and they're trying to make it even more limited. And of course, our skilled facilities are not just for end-of-life care. You might want to add a few of those administrators, sales folks, nurses to your circle of concern for questions, particularly if you have that incident that we were talking about, you fall and you fracture a hip. What do you know about the facilities around you? What do you know about the skilled facilities? How do you find the information on the skilled facilities to know where you want your mom to go to have rehab? You know, what have been the experiences of others for hip fracture, knees replacements, post-surgery care, post-stroke cardiac care? What are the best skilled facilities for that rehabilitative stay? Most of the time the hospital gives you a list, and the list typically includes every single facility in the county. So that doesn't narrow it down for you. Yeah, but then you've got to go, who's paying for it? Because if you have a certain insurance, that certain insurance might only be accepted at certain facilities. So that goes back to when you're choosing those advantage plans, be sure and be aware of what, just like you have to choose a doctor that's in network, you kind of only get certain facilities to choose from too. So be sure that you're aware of what your limitations are as far as choices based on that insurance that you are choosing if you switch from that red, white, and blue card.
Well, too, and I also think it makes a difference to maybe make sure word of mouth matters too. And I know that we've talked a lot about making sure that you're talking, you discuss things with professionals, and I still am advocating for that, but it also helps to talk to people that you trust.
Absolutely.
You say, hey, Mabel, I know last year you had your knee replaced and you rehabbed. Talk to me about your choices. And they can be an advantage too, to say, to at least help point in a certain direction. So don't discount that informal network of folks that can maybe give you some advice. And you take it for what it's worth, and you put it in the bag and you mix it up with everything else, and you say, oh yeah or no, and Yep.
Absolutely. For all the folks that I move, a lot of folks I move from skilled nursing to assisted living. For as many great experiences at one facility have been reported to me, as many negative experiences have been reported to me. But we all know there are some people that aren't going to be happy anywhere. And you have to take that into account, and that's real, and it is what it is. And then there are some people that are going to be happy, they're going to bloom where they're planted, no matter where they're planted. And, some people have a negative experience because it's a negative time in their life. They don't feel well. They feel very vulnerable because they're reliant on all of these people for very personal care needs. So we kind of have to run all of those details, kind of through that sieve of opinion and kind of figure out, whether or not that experience, there's what happened, what we think happened, and then somewhere in the middle, and I don't want to say truth because I don't think they're fibbing about their experience. It truly is their experience, but they're also coming from a very vulnerable position when they relate those experiences. So understand, nobody goes into rehab to have a good time. It is what it is.
No, it's not. It's not.
We're there to do the work so we can get to the next place we want to be. Kind of like life. We're here to do the work so we can get to the next place we want to be.
Absolutely.
For sure. And it's not forever. It is going to be short term because they are going to ask you to leave. So don't worry. They're not keeping you. I promise. So I do like to explain that circle of concern concept is not mine. It is not at all unique to me. It is addressed in beautiful detail by Dr. Dennis McCullough in the book, My Mother, Your Mother, which you can see the website there. You can purchase that book off of Amazon. Beth and I have shared experiences, hers far more significant than mine, with Dr. Dennis McCullough. He was a true joy to me. I met him at a I totally geeked out. He signed my copy of My Mother, Your Mother. So no, you cannot borrow it. It's all but under glass here with my other books that are signed by my healthcare heroes. But this is the concept that he came up with.
I was lucky enough to have him as a primary care physician when my husband and I lived in northern New England. So yes, you're not wrong to have geeked out after him.
Oh, totally geeked out. He's so smart, so compassionate, and just the thoughtfulness of that particular book was just, it was stunning. It really was. And then that's it. How'd I do? Did I talk too fast, too slow? Did I get all your questions answered?
I think all great things, and we did fabulous. I thank you so very much for what I think is going to be. It's a really great, just exactly the sweet spot with our caregiver conversations, Kara. You know, I mean, so this is for Brevard County folks in Brevard County, Florida, the Space Coast of Florida, and we keep it very specific and very, you know, just to help point people in the right direction, give them an idea as to where they're going, you know.
Absolutely. And if there's a question that I didn't answer, if there's something I spoke on that I wasn't clear and somebody wants follow-up, my information is right there on the screen. You're welcome to jot it down. Call me anytime. And I'd be happy to clarify anything that I've said or offer any other resources that somebody might need.
Thank you so very much, Kara. I'm really looking forward to maybe a time where we don't have coronavirus anymore, and you can actually come to Sunflower House and do this presentation live, you know, with a cup of coffee.
Well, I can tell you COVID will be over about the time I figure out how to use technology.
Exactly.
So
your cats are wonderful, but they don't push the right buttons on this.
You're exactly right. And I'm not sure where I'm supposed to be looking. I look at you through the whole thing, but I think I'm supposed to be looking over here. So, you know, here we all are, right? And the little one did go to sleep finally. See, I put people to sleep. It's all good. She's heard this speech before.
Thank you so very much, Karen. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Beth. Have a great day.